Hello, my name is Mo Hash, and today I'll be talking about my SLO3 about the Vietnam War. To start, I just want to say what really stood out to me was how divided the United States became during the 1960s and the early 70s, with not only just the war, but also the civil rights unrest and political unrest. Um, and I looked at specifically at America's involvement in Vietnam and the draft system and how not just soldiers but also how civilians were also affected by the war. Uh, what interested what interested me the most was how the government kept increasing involvement in the war, even though over time more and more Americans were beginning to question or just outright disapprove of sending over and wondering what even was the purpose of sending people over. To start, one thing I also found surprising was also how more involved the U.S. became in Vietnam over time, with at first sending mainly just advisors and supplies to help the South Vietnam stop the spread of communism. But eventually, after the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the U.S. began to start sending large numbers of troops into official combat. Even though the leaders believed they were stopping communism, this would eventually make the war become longer, more expensive, and would eventually become more controversial. Another thing that stood out to me was also the draft lottery. Um, which or when many men were selected randomly just purely based on birthdays to possibly serve in the military. And I believe this probably created a lot of fear and stress because people had very little control of whether or not they would be sent to war. And I think it was kind of a two sides to the coin where some people believed were fine with it because it was their duty and wanted to serve the country, while others protested because they didn't see the point in the war and thought it was unfair to be drafted without basically having any control over whether or not you would go. And one thing I noticed was that a tension began to build also between patriotism and also public protest. Some Americans supported the war and believed that serving it was honorable, like I mentioned before, and wanted to serve the country in his honor. Well, others believe that the government was just making poor decisions and were just sending soldiers off to basically die for ultimately what seemed to be for no reason. And this created more division across the country with major protests, especially among like college students and young adults. Um, and I think it kind of shows how deeply divided our nation was um, politically, but also kind of socially. Um, and one of the things that kind of helped me understand more about Vietnam was definitely the draft footage and just interviews with veterans and hearing them describe their experiences made the war feel more, more personal and a little bit more emotional instead of just, I guess, reading about it. Um, some veterans would talk about their fear and the pressure and the emotional impact that it had on them once returning from home. And I feel like this connects to some people today because some people still debate on America's involvement in foreign conflicts and whether or not we should actually get involved with, for instance, Iran or getting involved with Israel. I think the Vietnam War also showed how important like media coverage can be, and kind of began a distrust in the government, especially after they really kind of kept under wraps what was going on and really didn't really tell the whole story, what was going on in Vietnam, and try to downplay it, which led to a, a very big distrust in the government after, and even today still, because of Vietnam. And overall, I feel like the Vietnam War helped me understand how complicated war can be for soldiers and for not just soldiers but also civilians, and how it affected millions of people and also created major divisions among the country and the people of the country. I think it also can show how government decisions and also media coverage can also shape um, history and can also leave a very lasting impact on a country over time. Thank you.